In this video, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the new Star Wars cabinet made by Arcade1Up. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. So Arcade1Up has recently launched their third wave of cabinets in their arcade lineup. They released the Marvel Superhero Cabinet, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and this Star Wars cabinet. This new wave of cabinet was just released here in Canada, and it's the first in the entire lineup to come bundled with additional features like a custom riser and a lit marquee. We're really starting to notice that as Arcade1Up is putting out product, they're starting to get into a really good groove. Even the boxes are starting to change, rather than just your generic black boxes that were pretty much all the same with the exception of the artwork on them for the cabinets. Now each of these new ones comes with their own featured unique artwork. I mean, it's a small change, it's just the box, but it is nice to see. So let's go ahead and take a look at all of the parts. The first thing that we're going to take a look at is the side panels. So both of the side panels are 100% mirror images of themselves. We get this beautifully crisp high resolution artwork that matches the original Atari Star Wars cabinet. All the details match right down to the shading and the color contrast. It looks really, really sharp. Next, we have the control deck. There isn't too much going on here. We have the original artwork that's displayed, and then we have the flight yoke centered on the panel. The yoke is actually a substantially better quality than I was expecting it to be. The rotation is really nice and tight, and it has far more tension than I originally thought they were going to put on, and that's a really good thing. As with all the other Arcade1Up cabinet machines, we have a standard power switch and volume control. Now they did make a change to the volume switch, and it's no longer just a toggle, it is now a pressure switch. And I'll show you how that works a little bit later in the video, but it is a really awesome change for a lot of reasons, but we'll talk about that later. Moving on to the marquee, this is actually going to be my first LED lit marquee. Arcade1Up is realizing that this is a feature that a lot of people have been wanting to do, and there's been a lot of companies out there making aftermarket backlit marquees for their Arcade1Up machines. So they've actually gone ahead and they're starting to produce them, and they're even actually re-releasing some of their Wave 1 cabinets bundled with this as well. The marquee is really well designed, and it's extremely lightweight too, and it looks really sharp. And that's not even when it's on. It looks good when it's off, and it also looks really nice when it's on too. They've designed it in a way that you just need a single power cord that's going to run directly from this panel all the way into the main PCB that is mounted on the back of our screen. Another big change in the release of this wave is actually a change in the placement of the speakers, as well as upgrading from a single mono speaker to a dual stereo. As most of you guys would know, we previously had all of our speakers directly on the control deck. That's no longer the case. They've been moved up and they're actually going to be pointing down from on top of the screen, kind of like what you would have seen on an original arcade cabinet. So this has many obvious benefits, including games being able to properly output the audio to both left and right channels. We had a lot of issues with that with the Street Fighter arcade cabinet. It didn't output the audio properly because it only had one speaker to output two. On the previous waves as well, we had a single 4-inch speaker, and what they've gone ahead and decided to do is give us two 3-inch speakers. And that isn't really something I'm a huge fan of, to go down in the size of the speaker, but as long as the sound quality is coming out, I'm not going to have too much of a problem with it. And I would imagine that the audio is still going to be fairly good for what they've decided to use. One of the biggest benefits here is that the speaker uses a 3.5mm jack to connect into the main PCB. So this is really easy to upgrade down the road. If you are not happy with the speakers, you can put your own computer speakers in there, plug them in, and they're pretty much good to go right out the gate. There's no need to cut wires or rewire anything at all, actually. The screen is more or less the same as all other previous screens. The artwork around the edge is very close to the bezel of the original cabinet. The screens are your normal LVDS monitors, just like every other Arcade1Up cabinet, and although they're not the greatest in quality, it does seem as though they've been properly adjusted prior to shipping, so we're seeing less complaints about color contrast than the general public. On the back of the monitors, where we're going to have our control PCB, this is different than previous cabinets, and it appears there have been some sort of an upgrade to the main board. As you guys can see, we now have an on-off switch, which I'm assuming is going to control the marquee light. we have a 3.5mm jack that I just previously mentioned, there's a micro USB port, and our power port right beside it. On the top, we also have a connector out to the Marquee. Let's go ahead and pop this thing off and take a look at the main board. So the board has gotten substantially smaller than in previous cabinets. I would imagine that these boards are a little bit more efficient and a little bit cheaper to produce. Some minor changes are the types of connectors used from the control board, and then additionally we also have a switch for the Marquee. The big changes here would be the addition of the micro USB port. Now we aren't 100% sure what it's going to be used for, but I suspect you would use it for things like firmware updates or reflashes if you end up corrupting your software, something that you could do yourself without having to have a new board sent out to you. But I would also bet that this could be a potential backdoor for somebody who's looking to mod one of these cabinets and either add games in or modify the software. It'll be interesting to see what comes of it. Assembly of the cabinet was really easy and only took me about 45 minutes to an hour, including building the riser. The only real changes with this cabinet were the additional 2 supports that needed to be installed on either side of the cabinet for the control deck to be mounted properly. After that, the deck slips right on in with no issues and can be screwed into place to complete the build. This cabinet honestly has the best visual appearance of any of the other cabinets that have been released, at least in my opinion. And now, I'm not even a huge fan of Star Wars, but fan or not, it looks sharp and it is eye-catching. They've gone with a blue trim around the cabinet to really make it pop and catch your eye, and that was a nice touch. I definitely wish that Arcade1Up would start to use real T-molding on these, but you can't have everything, and it certainly looks okay the way it's done. It's just not the greatest quality. The custom riser was also very well designed. It flows super good with the rest of the cabinet and it doesn't stick out nearly as much as the plain black ones did for any of the other previous machines. I think Arcade1Up realizes this and they're moving towards including a custom riser with all future machines. That just makes the most amount of sense. Now that the cabinet is completely assembled, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the lit Marquee. It really gives the build a nice finish. I didn't realize how much this feature would add to the completed look of the cabinet, but it really does. It's definitely something they need to keep up with in all of their future cabinets. Assembled, the Yoke feels incredibly strong and stable and controls really well. One thing that I wasn't really impressed with was the quality of the buttons and the triggers. Honestly, they feel really cheap. The Yoke itself feels strong, it feels sturdy, it's properly balanced, and it's really springy. But then as soon as you touch the buttons, it kind of kills that experience. They feel loose, they feel plasticky. They don't really have that responsiveness or feedback that you're looking for when you're pressing a button or pulling a trigger. Honestly, I feel like they could have done way better with this, and they dropped the ball on such a small and easy to fix issue. But like I said, the Yoke has great feedback, and I was intentionally playing around with it, and I was being pretty rough, and it handled it really well. As you can see here, even when I yank the Yoke over to one side, it smoothly rotates back and it levels itself back out in the center. This part of the controls were done really well. It's just really too bad about those buttons. As I mentioned before, the volume control was changed and is a really nice feature. Previously, you kind of had 3 settings. You would have off, you would have low, and you would have high. And to be honest, none of the cabinets really came with good presets. Pac-Man, for example, was ridiculously loud even on the lowest setting, and Mortal Kombat was equally as bad. Here we have the ability to toggle between 15 different volume settings, which is really nice, especially if you want to play and you don't want to ambush the room you're in with audio. The 3 games included with this cabinet are the first 3 Star Wars arcade titles. Star Wars and Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back were traditionally games displayed on a vector screen. Because Arcade1Up obviously doesn't use one of those and it uses an LCD screen, they kinda had to get crafty, and what they've done is added the ability to go into the game options from the main menu and adjust how the vector glow is to be displayed. I found that if you set it to bold, you end up getting the best visuals, but ultimately it's really up to your personal preference. In terms of gameplay, these 2 games play really well. They are very similar in style, where the player navigates through an on-screen wave of enemies, shooting and destroying enemy ships and avoiding being damaged. Once completing 3 or so waves, the cycle kind of restarts and it's just a little bit more difficult each time around. And what you're ultimately looking for is the high score. There are some minor differences between the games, but they're both really fun to play. I'd never really been interested in these types of games, but I was pleasantly surprised by how much fun I was having playing it. The third and last game on the list is Star Wars Return of the Jedi, and this is a very different game than the other two. It's an 8-bit color game rather than vector style, and the game is played in an isometric perspective. You're still using the Yoke, but this time you're trying to navigate your way through a stage avoiding damage and obstacles. It's also a fun game, but honestly I enjoyed the other two a little bit more personally. All in all, this cabinet blew my expectations out of the water. I picked it up because it was different than any of the other cabinets previously released, and honestly I think it fits into my top 3 that have been released so far. If you're on the fence about picking it up, I would say go for it if you can justify a $400 price tag. If not, these cabinets do go on sale from time to time, so keep an eye out for good deals. But that's all I've got for you for this video. Thank you so very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Let me know down below what you think of this cabinet. Do you own one? And if so, what is your opinion? Thanks so much. I'll talk to you guys again real soon.